So this is going to be our overview of the muscular system. So let's go ahead and watch this together.
Each time you take a step, 200 muscles work in unison to lift your foot, propel it forward, and set it down. It's just one of the many thousands of tasks performed by the muscular system. This network of over 650 muscles covers the body and is the reason we can blink, smile, run, jump, and stand upright. It's even responsible for the heart's dependable thump. First, what exactly is the muscular system? It's made up of three main muscle types: skeletal muscle, which attaches via tendons to our bones; cardiac muscle, which is only found in the heart; and smooth muscle, which lines the blood vessels and certain organs like the intestine and uterus. All three types are made up of muscle cells, also known as fibers, bundled tightly together. These bundles receive signals from the nervous system that contract the fibers, which in turn generates force and motion. This produces almost all the movements we make. Some of the only parts of the body whose motions aren't governed by the muscular system are sperm cells, the hair-like cilia in our airways, and certain white blood cells. Muscle contraction can be split into three main types. The first two, shortening muscle fibers and lengthening them, generate opposing forces. So the biceps will shorten while the triceps will lengthen or relax, pulling up the arm and making it bend at the elbow. This allows us to, say, pick up a book, or if the muscle relationship is reversed, put it down. This complementary partnership exists throughout the muscular system. The third type of contraction creates a stabilizing force. In these cases, the muscle fibers don't change in length, but instead keep the muscles rigid. This allows us to grip a mug of coffee or lean against a wall.
So this is typically what we think of when we talk about skeletal muscles. Like I was saying before, I'm going to go ahead and go back really quick. I really enjoy seeing this kind of worked out for us visually. But these are kind of our three main categories, right? We have skeletal muscles, like we saw before, where it's this is all our movement, right? If we look at the structure of these, they're just parallel bands. They're ropes. Their job is to pull bones closer together. So we can see that in their shape, right? Our cardiac muscle is found in your heart. And if you think about your heart's job is to squeeze. So you can see how this is kind of formed as like almost like a net. So if you imagine this is a net that squeezes, this can kind of help us understand what's going on. And then lastly, this is going to be our interesting one, is the smooth muscle, is that muscle that is found in our digestive tract, in the uterus of women, in blood vessels, all over the body, wherever else there's muscle tissues. This is what we call smooth muscle. So let's go ahead and look. This is typically what we think when we talk about skeletal muscle. Let's look at the other types.
A mug of coffee, posture by holding us upright. Skeletal muscles form the bulk of the muscular system, make up about 30 to 40% of the body's weight, and generate most of its motion. Some muscles are familiar to us, like the pectorals and the biceps. Others may be less so, like the buccinator, a muscle that attaches your cheek to your teeth, or the body's tiniest skeletal muscle, a 1 millimeter long tissue fragment called the stapedius that's nestled deep inside the ear. Wherever they occur, skeletal muscles are connected to the somatic nervous system, which gives us almost complete control over their movements. This muscle group also contains two types of muscle fibers to refine our motions even further: slow twitch and fast twitch.
So we can see this too if you talk about food, right? We have white meat and dark meat. So this is kind of the main difference in when we talk about muscle, right? When we talk about meat, we're eating muscle tissue from other animals. So if you think about dark meat, right? The dark meat, the reason the dark meat has that color is it has this darker, what we call myoglobin. So the red color here represents a protein that helps hold oxygen in. So the idea behind it is you have these that help endurance. So yeah, when we have white meat has less of this protein. But if we think about chicken, right, your chicken breast is different than the chicken thigh. So the chicken breast it doesn't have that long prolonged motion, right? Chickens aren't like flying constantly. Well, they're not flapping their wings constantly, right? So theirs has less of these because they're kind of like sprinting, right? They're used up fast, they get tired and it stops, but their leg muscles have a lot more of this dark. And you can see this too when you cut into meat. And this is the cooking expert, like the anatomy cooking show, right? You always want to let meat sit for a while because once you have to have those muscles kind of relax a bit before before you cut. But if you like take something off the grill and you cut it right away, you're going to see this red juice flow out. It is not blood. It's not blood that's flowing out. It's these darker proteins, these myoglobins, and you find these in both types, but it's more in the dark meat. So you can think of, we have different types of muscles. We have sprinting muscles and we have kind of endurance muscles. And depending on where you are in your body, you have different ones. And they're going to go over that in a sec.
Twitch fibers react instantly when triggered, but quickly use up their energy and tire out. Slow twitch fibers, on the other hand, are endurance cells. They react and use energy slowly so they can work for longer periods. A sprinter will accumulate more fast twitch muscles in her legs through continuous practice, enabling her to quickly, if briefly, pick up the pace. Whereas back muscles contain more slow twitch muscles to maintain your posture all day. Unlike the skeletal muscles, the body's cardiac and smooth muscles are managed by the autonomic nervous system, beyond our direct control.
So the heart and the smooth muscles, so cardiac tissue and smooth muscles, we don't have direct control over. We cannot cause our heart to beat if we think about it. We cannot cause our digestive system to squeeze and help you get food down your esophagus faster. We don't have direct control over them, the same way that we can move our arm to scratch our face. So there are ways that some animals may slow down their heartbeat, but they don't. We can do things to slow down our heartbeat. So for example, if you're really, really, really cold, as you start going through hypothermia, your body starts to slow down naturally, but that's because of the environment that you're in. You're not consciously thinking heart beats slower. So there are ways that the heart can slow down or speed up. Another one is like adrenaline, right? If you see like a bear chasing you, your heart's going to beat faster, but you don't have to make your heart beat faster. Your body does it kind of without your direct control. So it's kind of like a subtle little difference. So some animals and people and animals can be able to change how fast their heart beats, but they're not doing it by directly thinking about it. It's more a reaction.
That makes your heart thump roughly 3 billion times over the course of your life, which supplies the body with blood and oxygen. Autonomic control also contracts and relaxes smooth muscle in a rhythmic cycle. That pumps blood through the smooth internal walls of blood vessels, enables the intestine to constrict and push food through the digestive system, and allows the uterus to contract when a person is giving birth. As muscles work, they also use energy and produce an important byproduct, heat. In fact, muscle provides about 85% of your warmth, which
So that's really important. 85% of the heat generated by our body is from muscles. So you moving around creates heat. So that's why if you're ever really, really cold, you want to get up and move to warm yourself up. If you're really cold, your body shivers, right? We talked about that in terms of homeostasis, maintaining that balance for thermoregulation. So 85% of your heat is generated by these muscles contracting, which I think is pretty cool.
The heart and blood vessels then spread evenly across the body via the blood. Without that, we couldn't maintain the temperature necessary for our survival. The muscular system may be largely invisible to us, but it leaves its mark on almost everything we do, whether it's the blink of an eye or a race to the finish line. This video is made possible by our community.
Cool. So I think this is a good good overview of what's going on. For what we're doing today, if you go to about the minute mark here, this might be helpful for you if you're a visual learner and you want to kind of see these differences side by side. Because what we're going to be doing is we're going to try to talk about what each of these types of muscles are. So what do they do? What do they look like? And where are they found? So where they're found, you can see clearly an image, right? What do they look like? Those are the different images of what they look like. And what they do, we talked about, it's a little bit later in the video, but we can also see that in the reading for today. So this is another way for you guys to get the information for today. All right. So let's talk a little bit. I'm going to preview some of the reading with you guys and pull out some of the important information, and then we'll talk about today's assignment. So we'll take about 5 minutes and go over this, and then I will give you plenty of time to do our work for today. All right, so when we talk about muscle tissue, these are things that are true for all types. We know there are 3 types of muscle tissue: skeletal, smooth, and cardiac, but the first couple sentences here are true for all of them. So muscle tissues are very long, and they contain fibers that are able to move. So when we think about how long they are, if you put your hand on your hip and on your kneecap, that whole distance there are muscles that run from your hip to your kneecap. So those are pretty long, depending on how tall you are, right? Excuse me. It could be upwards of a foot. These proteins are 2 different parts, actin and myosin. These are going to be really important for us. So all muscle tissue is made up of actin and myosin. This is one thing they all have in common. These proteins are organized into muscle fibers called myofilaments. So all muscles are made up of actin and myosin. They allow movement, and they are organized into what we call myofilaments. When we think about a filament, filament's kind of like a string or a web or something like that. And these are kind of our main types: skeletal, smooth, and cardiac. For skeletal muscle, we look at these tissues here. So if we notice, they're striped. That's important. These are what we call striations. There are visible striations or lines that can be seen. So we call this a striated muscle. It's striped. Skeletal muscles are voluntary muscles, meaning we have control over them. So if something's voluntary, if you volunteer, you choose to do something. So voluntary muscles are muscles that we choose to move. They're attached to the skeleton by tendons, hence the name skeletal muscle. They're involved in our movement and maintenance of posture, so helping us stand upright. And they make up about 30 to 40. Here it says 35 to 45. So somewhere around there. So we could say about 40% of our human body is made up of skeletal muscle tissue. So that's a lot of our mass is made up of this. For smooth muscle, here we see it's involuntary. So if it's something's involuntary, that means you do not choose to do it. It happens on its own. And this kind of makes sense when we think about what their job is. So it makes up the lining of most organs of the body. So our intestinal tract, so our digestive tract, our respiratory tract, so our esophagus, our bronchi, blood vessels, our bladder. So if you think about your bladder, as your bladder starts to fill with urine, it needs to be able to expand, and then it needs to go back to its normal size. So that's all done with smooth muscles. Uterus, same idea. After birth, the uterus needs to go back to its original shape because it no longer needs to hold the baby. So these are different ways that we have smooth muscles that happen on their own, and they're contained in a lot of organs inside the body. So they do not contract voluntarily. So that's just something that's different, right? And this is going to be kind of our focus today. How are these muscles the same? How are they different from each other? So they do not contract voluntarily, meaning they don't happen on with our control. We don't choose to contract them. And they don't have visible striations. What we mean by that, we can see there's clear lines here. There's clear striations here. We don't have the lines going along the muscle. We can see that these white lines represent how they're separated, but it's not the same as, it's kind of like here, we can see these white lines separated. We don't have these red striations on these. So for example, peristalsis is that process of digesting, right? Where you have those waves that help food move down your esophagus into your stomach and then through your intestines. All right, last one is our cardiac muscle. So if we look at our cardiac muscle, notice the difference between this. Here, they're all parallel. Here, they're kind of going all which way. And here, it's kind of like branches, like for a tree. This is our cardiac muscle. It makes up your heart. It's extremely strong and dense tissue because it needs to be able to beat forever. That's why it has mitochondria. It has a lot of mitochondria for energy. So cardiac muscle tissue striated, what we mean by that, look at those red bands. We can see those red lines the same way that we could see this for skeletal tissue. But it also has myofibrils that are arranged into larger striations called intercalated discs. So we can see that these discs kind of like hold the cells together. So this is kind of where they're joined together because they need to be really, really strong. So that's essentially it for the information for today. What you're going to be doing with it is kind of organizing everything into 2 different graphic organizers. So we'll talk about what each one is and how to fill it out, and then you will have the rest of the period to work on it. So you should be able to finish this today. Okay, first one here is pretty straightforward. We're going with description, function, and location for the 3 types. So description, what does it look like? Describe what they look like. Function, what does it do? And then location, where is it found? So what does it look like? What does it do? Where are they found? So we're going to fill this in using the information from the slides. So this should be pretty easy. All right, for the next part, we have kind of this key. There's some other things that you may need to include, but these are kind of the major ones. We have a Venn diagram, so we're going to try to compare and contrast all of them together at once. So we're going to look at what is shared between the different types of muscles. So which ones have striations? What are the functions of each? What are the locations? Which contain actin and myosin? Which ones are voluntary? Which ones are involuntary? So all of these are kind of different parts that we're going to put somewhere on our diagram. So our diagram for today, I tried to color code it. So you can just type it in the box here. But we're going to try to fill in which of these are, so if we look at striations, is it for smooth, skeletal, cardiac, or is it a combination of them? So we can fill in the first one together for striations. So which of our muscle types are striated and have striations? Skeletal, smooth, or cardiac? So if we were filling in striations, would we put it for skeletal, smooth, or cardiac? let's look at it visually, right? Striations or stripes. So skeletal for sure, right? Skeletal has striations. Smooth doesn't. And cardiac also has striations. So we're going to put for skeletal and cardiac together. So instead of writing it twice, so this is cardiac is striated, and so is skeletal. We're going to put it in the spot where they connect. So this here, this purple is shared by cardiac and skeletal. We can't put it in the white because the smooth also doesn't share that, right? So this is something that's unique to cardiac and skeletal. So there should be at least one thing in each of these boxes here from our kind of word bank or term bank here. So I'm going to let you guys kind of do the reading to fill this out. We have one example of kind of how to complete this diagram. If you have any questions along the way, feel free to ask. But today is going to be just getting the information together and organizing it in two different ways that will help us kind of see the difference and similarities between these types of muscle tissue. All right, so I'm going to let you guys get to it. If you have any questions, feel free to ask as we're going through it.